Sponge on the Run is the latest Spongebob movie that nobody really asked for. It's the first one to be fully 3D animated. If you want my thoughts on the other Spongebob movies, I think the original movie is really adorable. It's a very classic feeling adventure. It's very true to the characters and has some great goofy iconic moments and set pieces. It's not really revolutionary as a movie, but it's just iconic to my generation. A lot of people around my age have seen it and we reference it all the time. It's a lot of fun. It's the perfect direction to take a SpongeBob movie. The second movie, Sponge Out of Water, often gets completely forgotten by people really, but I'm of the opinion that it's also really great. It is very different from the first movie. Out of Water focuses almost entirely on just creating the most bizarre and surreal humor possible. The plot it follows is really all over the place, and the shoehorned 3D live-action hybrid part at the end is definitely very out of place. And it's only there as some sort of greater marketing thing since superheroes were big when this movie came out. But it's such a small part of the movie, and I don't think a lot of people realize that because a lot of people probably skipped out on this movie. About 70% of Sponge Out of Water is a 2D animated movie, and it's almost like they knew that this would be the last 2D SpongeBob movie, so they went all out on taking advantage of the medium and doing super zany things with it. Plus, the movie's main dynamic is SpongeBob working with Plankton, and that's something we don't see very much of, and it's really entertaining. The rest of the show's cast gets mostly forgotten, however, but the same can be sort of said for the first movie too. Sponge Out of Water deserves a lot more credit than it gets. If you skipped out on watching this one, you should totally check it out. You'll definitely laugh quite a bit, I'm sure. Anyways, now on to Sponge on the Run, the third SpongeBob movie. Gotta say, I don't like this movie's title, like, at all. It's way too similar to Out of Water. But also, overall, I don't really like this movie that much. But let's start with the good stuff, which is, surprisingly, the amazing animation. Yes, it's all 3D, but they do the Captain Underpants movie sort of style with it, and they frame and animate everything as if it were 2D. It looks really cool, and they make the characters super expressive. Early on in the movie, I was losing focus on the story and jokes because I was just so invested in looking at the style. I like how everything is textured to look sort of like aquarium decorations, instead of using realistic undersea rocks or textures. Looks almost like stop motion animation in a way. Everything moves and flows beautifully. It gives off the perfect visual vibe for SpongeBob. And yes, it's not 2D. 2D still would have been better, but the way they captured the show's style in a new way is impressive and appealing to me. There are a few good jokes throughout the movie. Also, as you can expect since they've been playing these characters for like 20 years now, all the voice acting is really good. Although I was really distracted by how the voice actor for Poseidon was the same voice actor who did Bubbles the Dolphin in the second movie, and he just puts on the exact same voice. Why didn't they get someone else? Or is there some greater lore meaning to this somehow? You'd think they'd want to get like a celebrity to play the villain or something. I would have rather just had Bubbles in this movie. Bring back Bubbles 2021, Bubble Squad! Surprisingly, the movie is kind of a musical. It was never advertised as such, but there are a handful of musical scenes in this. Though it's nowhere near as good as the SpongeBob Broadway musical, which by the way, you should watch that if you haven't. I'd say that's technically the second best SpongeBob movie, if it counts as one. There's this awkward cowboy zombie musical scene in the middle of the movie. It's pleasantly weird, I guess, but if you're older than like 10 years old, you probably won't laugh at all. You'll just feel sort of awkward. It goes on for a while, but then it's forgotten. Nothing else like that happens in the movie. It's just like a weird dream thing that they put in to force in celebrities to the movie. But again, why not just have the celebrities do voices instead of needing them to cameo in some really out of place scene? This scene would be less weird if we had more totally random scenes like that, but we don't. It goes back to normal plot progression after that. That scene does introduce the Keanu Reeves Tumbleweed character, and I'm surprised he actually had a lot of screen time. He's like a narrator. His acting is a bit bland though. I mean, maybe that's the joke, I guess. I don't really know much about him. But it's just a weird joke, like he does nothing but be annoyed by SpongeBob and Patrick the whole time, and try to directly push the plot forwards in almost a fourth wall breaking way. It just feels weird. Like, again, this could have worked if there was similar zaniness in other parts of the movie. But as it is, it just feels weird. Back on the topic of music though, one of the original songs towards the ending of the movie was really cute and charming, but they also have a montage scene where they use a licensed song, which is really strange for SpongeBob. Yeah, Goofy Goober Rock was a parody of a real song, but they never just used a real song in a montage context like they do in this movie. I find it particularly weird because they used Livin' La Vida Loca, which is a darn great pop song, but Shrek 2 already used that 17 years ago. Why would they use that song instead of a modern one? It works for the scene, I guess, but it just feels like an out-of-place choice for both SpongeBob as a media property and just for like the modern era in general. You think they would have shoved a JoJo Siwa song or something in there. Just some sort of newer Nickelodeon sounding song, which would make more sense. It's just weird to me. And altogether, the movie's story is just lame. It doesn't really feel like a movie scale plot. Not only does it sort of rehash the Gary Come Home episode with a slightly different premise, it's mainly just a road trip with SpongeBob and Patrick. It's like a mix of the other two SpongeBob movies, but nowhere near as good as either of them. It's a road trip like the first movie, but it has no interesting roadblocks or stakes going on. This movie has one set piece, and it's the casino town that Poseidon lives in. It looks cool visually, but it's such a bland setting if you really think about it. Like, we kind of see that thing all the time. This movie also has some surreal humor, like the whole Keanu Reeves tumbleweed thing, but not as much as Out of Water, and absolutely none as funny or visually interesting as Out of Water either. The surrealism is too few and far between, so there's like a big lack of consistency. It tries to be both movies, but it just does not do enough to be on par with either of them. They should have stuck with one direction. You can't just do both types of plot because they're polar opposites. Plus, this movie focuses on mainly SpongeBob and Patrick, and we've seen these two together a million times. Out of Water gave us SpongeBob and Plankton. Why didn't On the Run pair SpongeBob with someone else? Like, I don't know, Sandy for example. She gets like no screen time in any of these three movies. The remainder of the SpongeBob cast are like completely ignored until the movie's ending. Aside from Plankton, I guess, he gets a fair amount of screen time, but he's always kind of solo or just with Karen or something. He's also hilarious and animated the best out of everyone, like he has some really great expressions. But yeah, there's not too much fun stuff until the ending of this movie. On the Run is pretty boring, but it becomes way more enjoyable in the last 20 minutes, when the cast is finally all together. Comparatively though, Sponge Out of Water was entertaining for the entire movie because of the unconventional pairing of SpongeBob and Plankton. Maybe the whole cast got sidelined in that movie too, but the main pair was a lot more interesting than just SpongeBob and Patrick. There's also the whole Camp Coral aspect of this movie that felt totally tacked on for no reason. I feel like this movie got some false advertising just like Out of Water did. The young SpongeBob backstory stuff takes up maybe 7 minutes total of this whole movie. Admittedly, I kind of have a weak spot for it. It is all really cute as heck, but it feels totally useless to the plot the way it's integrated. In the climax of this movie, there's this drawn-out section where the cast just share memories from camp. They talk about how SpongeBob helped them when they first met as kids, and it's just one by one each character telling a flashback. Doing it this way makes it feel really forced. They could have implemented this into the plot so much better, like having flashbacks evenly spaced throughout the movie, or somehow having King Poseidon be involved in the flashbacks so that he can have a greater purpose in the plot or feel like more of a villain. Or have SpongeBob reunite with Gary using something similar to when they first met. There's just no plot ties between the two events, they just kind of put the flashbacks in here. The flashbacks could be used for foreshadowing or parallels or something, but they really don't do that at all. They simply use the flashbacks as a cute thing to spawn the birth of the new Camp Coral spin-off show, but they could have easily implemented the flashbacks into the movie's plot progression. We've seen that done before in dozens of movies. Would have made the young SpongeBob stuff feel less forced. Again though, the flashbacks are adorable, I have to admit. Especially Squidward's. But don't these mess with the SpongeBob lore? SpongeBob barely has continuity, but like, now they need some elaborate reason why SpongeBob didn't know Sandy in the second episode of the show. I mean, he met her in camp, but then he acted like he'd never seen her before. And SpongeBob meeting Mr. Krabs in the past seems weird too. That gives like a weird, completely different perspective on the relationship they have. The story here is that SpongeBob indirectly encouraged Mr. Krabs to open a restaurant. And then what, in the future Krabs hires SpongeBob, knowing he was the kid who inspired him? It just seems wrong, like, Mr. Krabs is not the type of character who'd remember or care about something a random 8-year-old sponge kid told him. Plus, does the Friend or Foe episode of the series counteract that? I haven't seen that one in forever. This is all nitpicky, but still, it bothers me. Overall, what's really going on here is that this is the first SpongeBob movie, but for a new generation of kids. It has a similar plot to the first, but it's wrapped up with more of what could be considered modern SpongeBob humor, or well, modern Nickelodeon humor, or even just, I guess, modern kid humor. I don't really know what kids think is funny these days. But that's how old the first SpongeBob movie is, if you think about it. The problem here is that it's not like the first movie aged at all. A kid today could still watch the original and totally love it. They don't need this weird pseudo-replacement movie. It's just a worse version of the first. I don't understand what they were trying to accomplish with this movie, aside from getting that spin-off series made. But with that negative stuff said, there is some wonderful animation on display here, and some occasional good jokes and cute moments. Mostly towards the end of the movie though. The animation is great throughout, but the story and humor and stuff, it's mostly better towards the end of the movie. There's even a sweet tribute to Steven Hillenburg at the end, which is very nice. The animation in this movie is so interesting though that it may be worth watching just because of that. But you probably won't get much out of this movie unless you're a die-hard SpongeBob fan. The future of SpongeBob sure is looking interesting. They're working on spinning out a ton of different spin-off shows for it. I wonder how well these all end up doing. I don't really have a perspective on how popular SpongeBob is anymore. There's probably just a bunch of Netflix shows or like YouTube channels that kids are much more interested in these days. Apparently the Camp Coral show that's already out isn't as bad as the advertisements made it seem. It may have some funny visual gags in it from what I've glanced at, but at the end of the day, none of this is really necessary. It's just Nickelodeon trying to market the only cartoon that they have. I mean, right? They pretty much only have SpongeBob and Loud House now. They're working on some Last Airbender stuff, but that's like a completely different kind of thing, right? So did you check out Sponge on the Run? I almost said Sponge Out of Water. Again, the titles are too similar. Let me know your thoughts about it in the comments. Thanks for watching. Please leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon to know when I post new videos. Thanks for watching, and super special thanks to my Patreon supporters. Support me on Patreon and you'll be able to submit video topics, see exclusive behind the scenes content, and help me keep this channel going. Also follow me on Twitter and TikTok for special updates.